who's drawing the lines on the map? Or, in this case, who's drawing the map around the lines? In 1727, early on in the 18th century, William Byrd II is part of a commission from the state of Virginia and another set of commissioners from North Carolina to survey the line or set the line that is the demarcation between North Carolina and Virginia. They have a couple of surveyors, what they call mathematicians, to come and help them, as well as, let's say, 15 or 20 woodsmen to go along with that group of people to survey the line between those two states. And of course, the king had sort of drawn a line, and there was an agreement between the two governors, but they didn't know where that line actually went. So they needed to send some folks to go in and survey that line. And William Byrd is part of that. He does he's part of the commissioners, and he's given the job of recording the events. And he does two sets. He does the public version that goes to the governor, and then he does his own private sort of correspondence with himself. I don't know if he really intends to publish it, but he kind of gives his own personal thoughts and about the private things happening with this. And this is published within the Colonial American Travels narratives in this book. You'll find a link down in the description section. Excellent book with several, like 4 different journals about colonial life. And the secret journal, he actually gives funny names to the characters because he's saying not necessarily nice things about them, so he doesn't want to use their real names. It turns out, though, I think that as you read this narrative, that the true heroes of this are the woodsmen, the guys with their feet on the ground actually making this work. And in fact, you kind of get a real feel for it pretty much right away when he talks about the provisioning of this group of men and the accommodations. So most of the time, the commissioners, they have along with them 2 tents, marquee tent, and probably for the supplies, and then a smaller tent for their sleeping accommodations. They don't describe it more than just saying a tent. And the vast majority of the time, when they're out in the field, they're actually staying at local houses. The area that they're going isn't necessarily completely devoid of habitation, except for one spot. So they're staying in houses while the woodsmen and the guys actually doing the work are out there in the field. They don't have tents, they don't have anything, and I'll describe a little bit of their sleeping arrangement here when I get further on. Here, let's talk about the supplies for these men. Here, the commissioners were supplied with 2 kegs of wine, 2 kegs of rum, 173 pounds of bread, and several other conveniences. So there's what they've got here, and really they only talk about wine, rum, bread, and conveniences. And he actually says here the commissioners were supplied. Now, these are probably supplies for all the men. The funny thing about this bread is when he says bread, he probably means ship's biscuit, or we might term it in a later century hardtack. And it is very much hardtack because he actually describes one of the commissioners losing a tooth chewing on his ship's biscuit later on. Yeah, he describes here a few pages later. During the voyage, Shoebrush, which is one of his names for, I think, one of the North Carolina commissioners, in champing on a biscuit, forced out one of his teeth, which an unlucky flux had left loose in his head. Many times you'll have different sort of diseases in the 18th century, and specifically something like scurvy will loosen your teeth. So he already had a loose tooth and he busted it out. He was also complaining of gout, and he had to walk 2 miles regardless of his gout. These men had a lot of different health complaints as they were going into the field. We don't hear about the health complaints of the woodsmen who were actually out there in the field the whole time. Part of the places that they had to survey was this area known as the Dismal, or it was a large swamp. And the swamp was something like 30 miles long and 15 miles wide at the point, where it needed to be surveyed across.